Okay, we are on Ayin Amud Beis, toward the bottom of the page. Four lines to the bottom of the page.
Oh. Here? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I made you slept for no reason.
Huh?
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's almost important having to read.
Okay. So we were middle of yesterday was the difference between someone who's born Jewish versus someone who converts. Whereas somebody who is born Jewish, God says to him, I'll come close to you and you'll be my nation. Whereas somebody who converts, it's the opposite. You'll be my nation and then I'll come close to you. So the Gemara continues. Omer of Chelbay, third to bottom line on 70b. Koshim Gerim Yisrael Kisapachas. Converts are difficult to Jewish people, like leprosy. Shenemar, the Nilva Hager, the convert will accompany you, will attach himself to you. The Nispechu Olav Beis Yaakov. And then there will be Nispechu. The house of Yaakov, that is the Jewish people, will be Nispechu. What does the word Nispechu mean? Ksivach of a Nispechu. Ksivasam l'sa'es v'lasapachas. The word nispechu means sapachas. What does sapachas mean? Sapachas is an adjective that's often used in conjunction with leprosy, with tsaras.
It wasn't one of the forms of. One of the forms of
tsaras is called sapachas, right?
Ah.
Okay, so now what does this mean? So Rashi says the simple answer is because the converts typically don't keep the laws, and therefore people learn from their actions. Now, as I mentioned before, his famous Tosfos here, it's actually Tosfos starts over here. It goes on top of Ayin Aleph and Beis, where Tosfos I guess asked for Avram Hager. One of the Tosfos was a convert, so they asked him to interpret the Gemara. So he had a much more charitable position. He said it's the opposite. He says that converts keep the laws in a much more stringent manner than Jews that were born Jewish. So therefore, it's like it's like Nineveh. Yaina didn't want to go to Nineveh because he knew that Nineveh would do tshuva, and it would be a kitrig, it would be a prosecution against the Jewish people that Nineveh would do tshuva, but they wouldn't. So Tosfos says that that's what happens to a convert. The converts keep the mitzvahs so significantly and so stringently that it makes it sort of persecutes the regular Jews that don't keep the mitzvahs stringently. Now, this Gemara is one of the many reasons why we don't seek out converts. This is true, by the way, whether it's Rashi's position or Tosfos' position. If we're going to be persecuted because other people are more stringent in mitzvahs than we are, we better make sure that they are stringent in mitzvahs, and that they're serious about it. And according to Rashi in general, we wouldn't want converts. So this is one of the many reasons why we don't seek to convert. We don't missionize. Okay, we don't missionize. One of the reasons is this Gemara. Whichever interpretation you'd like, converts are like a leprosy to Jewish people, and nobody obviously wants to go get leprosy. Now, either it's because the converts are so good, or because the converts are so bad. Whichever direction you go, you still only want to take people who are serious, very serious. You don't want to take people who aren't serious. Why should the Jewish people suffer the consequence of taking somebody who doesn't really want to convert?
The other thing that I messed with, God would go to the nations first, or God would the nations would come to him. One was a convert, one was the.
Yeah, so that was the Gemara. So end of yesterday. So basically, by the Jewish people, God says, "I'll come to them, and then they'll be my nation." Sort of, they get like a first pass. God doesn't look at their actions. He says, "Okay, don't worry, you're my God. I'm your God, and then you'll be my nation. Whereas by the converts, it's the opposite. You'll be my nation, then I'll be your God. There has to be sort of an expression of sincerity first, and then God says, okay, I'm your God. Okay, last line, 70b. So now we get into the sort of the dangerous space. Talking about other people's genealogy. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitahar shvatim, he traces their genealogical history, integrity. Shift to Shalevi mitahar tchila. The nation, the tribe of Levi goes first. Shenemar, as the verse states, v'yoshev mitzaref umitahar kesef. V'tiar b'nei Levi v'zik goysam kizav v'kesef. V'hoyel Hashem egisha mincha b'tzedakah. When it comes time for God to purify everything, 71a. About 7 lines down. First one line is Matahar.
71a, did you say?
71a, fourth line down. Amar Yeshua ben Levi. So God purifies first the tribe of Levi. And then they will they'll bring the presence to God with righteousness. Amar Yeshua ben Levi, Kesef mit. One second. Okay, so the first version here is referring to the Tiras ben Levi, the nation, the tribe of Levi is purified first. The second version, Amar Bishum Levi has a different version here. Kesef mitahar mamzerim. Shenemar v'yeshem mitzar from Tower Kesef. What does this mean? Kesef means silver, but it also means money. So let's say you have a family of Mamzerim that because of their wealth and standing, they sort of got into the Jewish people. Right? In other words, people married into them because they were wealthy and ignore the fact that they were a family of Mamzerim. So that is a family that God will not expel when it comes time that when the Mashiach comes and God sort of purifies the families. He won't expel them. This is one of the things we'll learn, that obviously there are certainly families amongst the Jewish people that have seriously questionable genealogy, if not outright mamzeros, and some of them are going to stay. Not everybody's going to be expelled, and the reason is simple, because mamzeros, right, only multiplies, right? Whichever side is a mamzer, the children can be mamzer, whether it's a son or a daughter. And a couple of people made a mistake hundreds of years ago, but that means that there are going to be mamzerim around today. And because of that, God sort of ignores it. Because of the money, the kesef, the money, so God as mitari purifies the tribe of the mamzerim that sort of got into the community. What does it mean that they bring presence to God with righteousness? Sort of an act of righteousness God does with his people, that in a family that sort of had some mamzeros attached to it, we let it be. Gufa, Amar Vuda, Mashmuel, Kol Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Yisrael Bavel. So we pointed this out yesterday. Basically, every nation, every country is secondary in its genealogy to Israel, and Israel is secondary to Bavel. Why? Because of the great purification, which is the beginning of this parak, right? Asar Yochsanolami Bavel. Ezra made this great, the sorting hats, basically, the great selection. Okay, Bimei Rebbe, in the time of Rebbe, Bikshu Lases Bavel Isla Eretz Yisrael. They decided they're going to purify Eretz Yisrael. Omer Lahen, so Rebbe said to them, you're putting thorns in my eyes. In other words, if you want to purify the nation in Israel, what does that mean? That means you have to find all the mamzerim and kick them out. And not a task I would like to do. If you want, Rav Chanina could take care of it. I'm not doing it. So Rav Chanina bar Chama decided to do this. Amar Lahem. So Rav Chanina bar Chama says, this I've accepted this from Rishmol bar Rabbi Yosi, that said in the name of his father, Kol arotzes isel Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael isel Bavel. All the countries are secondary to Israel, and Israel secondary to Bavel. And therefore, that's how it's going to stay, and we're not going to change it. The mayor of Pinchas, in the time of Pinchas, they wanted to do the same thing. Big Shulas is Bavel Isel Eretz Yisrael. They wanted to make Bavel secondary to Israel. Amar lahem avodav, Amar lahem la'avdav. He says to his slaves as follows. I need to make an announcement. The problem is when I make this announcement, everybody's going to kick me out. So everyone's going to beat me up. So here's what we're going to do. Apparently he was an invalid. He couldn't walk. So he said, look, this is what we're going to do. You're going to bring me into the synagogue, into the Beis Medrash, and I'm going to make two statements. At the conclusion of the second statement, you dump me on the bed and you run. So what did he do? When he walked in, he says to them, he says the halacha, the requirement to slaughter birds before you eat them is not a biblical requirement. Okay, so obviously he stirred a pot there, right? Everybody starts tummeling. What's going on? Is it true you don't really have, it's only midrabanan that you have to slaughter birds? As they're busy discussing this question, he quickly screams out, he says, he says to them, he says, in terms of genealogical integrity, every land is secondary to Israel, and Israel is secondary to Bavel. And he said this in Israel, so they weren't too happy with that. They dumped him on the bed and they ran out with him. And sure enough, the people in the study hall weren't too thrilled. They chased after him because they wanted to. They were not pleased to know that everyone in Bavel was more, genealogically pure than they were. But they sort of planned this well, and they couldn't catch up to him. So they decided, we'll do our own investigations. What exactly did he mean? Yashvu ubatku. They sat down and started investigating genealogies until it got to the point where there was people would threaten their lives if they sort of revealed what was going on, and I'm pretty sure they had to stop. I'd say I once lived in an area where it was where I was told that, in a different neighborhood that was adjacent to where I was living, there was a story of a womanizer who seduced many religious women who were married, and at some point somebody found out of the story, a bunch of rabbis, and he basically blackmailed them not to discuss the story. And to allow, basically, that he got away with very minimal punishment for it, and basically said, "Look, if you say anything about me, I'll just add people to my roster of people who I claim to have womanized." And there were at least 8 divorces from that event. It's crazy, but but there probably were many more than that. So this is the type of thing that that's where it goes. It goes to it can be very, 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 very messy. Rav Yochanan says, "Heichala b'yadeinihi." 1 second. He basically made a promise. 1 second. Rabbi Yochanan saying, "Look, we made an oath that we know exactly which families are questionable. But what could we do? We can't announce it. There have been some of the greatest scholars of the generation have married into those families that were highly questionable." He holds like the opinion of Rav Yitzchak. If a family sort of assimilates their way in, you're stuck with it. Abai says, we also learned there was a family whose name was Beis Hatzrifa on the other side of the Jordan River. The Richka ben Sion Bizroya. And this fellow Ben Sion sort of pushed them away. He announced that they were of questionable genealogy. I said there was another family also of questionable genealogy. The Kirva ben Sion Bizroya. And this fellow Ben Zion came along, and he sort of forced everybody to marry into that family. These type of stories. In other words, when Eliyahu Navi comes, he's going to come to bring families closer and push some away. Those that people know about and haven't really assimilated, those will be pushed away. Those that have been assimilated, there's nothing to do about it. Okay, Ta'ana, there was another, we learned, there's another big family, and the rabbis would not want to reveal its name. But the rabbis would give the name over to their sons and their students. Once every 7 years. And some say was twice every 7 years. Amr of Nachman Bar Yitzchak of Nachman Yitzchak says, it's logical to presume it was once every 7 years, like we learned to the Brisa. The guy says, I'll be a Nazir if I don't reveal that this family is that a family is questionable. So what should he do? It's better that he should be a Nazir than he should fulfill the condition and not be required to be a Nazir. So therefore, presumably the minimal amount is what we do. So therefore, the rabbis would not reveal the secret more than once every 7 years. Once we're talking about once every 7 years and big secrets, so now we talk about big secrets here. Amr Rabbi Barchana, Amr of Yechanan. Rabbi Barchana says the name of Rabbi Yechanan, Shem ben Arba Oisius. The name of, this is the what they call in English the Tetragrammaton, God's 4-letter name, Yud and then Hey, etc. The pronunciation of that name, the rabbis teach their students how to pronounce it once every 7 years. Some say twice every 7 years. Amr of Nachman Yitzchak says, once every 7 years. The chsiv, as the verse states, Zeh Shemi La'olam. This is my name forever. La'olam, forever, is spelled without a vav. So you put a cholam on the ayin. La'olam, the ayin has a cholam, but it is spelled without a vav. So it should actually be pronounced as la'olam. La'olam means for secret, to be hidden. So in other words, what God's saying is that the pronunciation of my name is to be hidden. La'olam ksiv, it's to be hidden. Rava thought to teach it publicly. It's supposed to be hidden. You know, there's a group of people that call themselves witnesses. They claim to be able to pronounce the name, right? But in our tradition, it's la'olam. So it's supposed to be hidden. Okay, Ksiv Ravina had the following question. Ksiv zeh shemi, Ksiv zeh zichri. It says, this is my name, and it says, this is my remembrance. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God says, Loikesh ani nichtav ani nikra. Not as I am written, am I pronounced. Nichtav ani b'yud hey. I'm written with the letters of yud hey. And v'nikra, but I'm pronounced ba'alef dalas, which is typically what we do, right? We don't read the word, the tetragrammaton, we don't read. We pronounce it as if it's alef dalas nun yud. Tana Rabbanon. Barishono, initially, Shem ben Shteim Esri Oisius. There was a 12-letter name. They would teach everybody the 12-letter name of God. Misha Rabba Apritzim Hayomais. Now, just to point out, Kabbalistically, there are many names of God. A tremendous amount of names. As a matter of fact, the Ramban writes that all of Torah is basically, God's name hidden, at every right turn. So there are many different names. Obviously, there's ones that we use commonly, maybe 7 or 8 of them. But there are many more. There's a 12-letter name, which is Kabbalistically significant. They teach it to everybody. Misharabra Pritzim, when the people that would use the name for secular purposes they would not use it for the right reasons. They would give it to people that were more modest and quiet. Shepekahuna that were kahanim. Batsnuin Shepekahuna Mavlina ben Imas Achem Kahanim. And these modest people that were kahanim, when they would pronounce the name, they would say it with other people, and they would say it so quickly you couldn't hear it. Tanya, we learned Amr Tarfin Pamachas Alisi Achar Achei Email Duchen. I went up with my mother's brother, my uncle, to the Duchen, who was a Kayan. V'tisi ozni eitzel Kayan Gadol, v'shamati shevliya sham v'imas achav hakahanim. So the Kayan Gadol would pronounce the Tetragrammaton, right? We read about this on the davening of Yom Kippur. He would pronounce he would actually say God's name. That's when everybody would fall and bow. And I tried to listen to what it was, and I couldn't hear it because everybody else was singing so loud, and he said it so fast, it was impossible to hear. Amr Yehudah Amarav, Shem ben Arba Ushtayim Isis, the 42-letter name. Rashi says we don't know what the 42-letter name is. I believe there are some Kabbalists that have a 42-letter name. They can tell you what it is. Somebody who's modest, he's humble. He's already completed half of his life. He's in the golden years. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get inebriated. He isn't strict about the way people interact with him. Whoever knows it, and he's careful, and he keeps it with purity. He's beloved above, he's cherished, in this world, people like him. They must say Mutelas Alabrias, and people are afraid of him. He inherits two worlds. This world, the next world. Okay, back to the discussion of genealogy. Amar Shmuel, Mishmei de Saba, Bovel becheskes kasher sevenits. Bovel is in a chazaka. That means there's a presumption if you marry somebody from Bovel, they're probably kosher. Unless you know the family sort of has a questionable background. Shar Rotzis, the other nations, becheskes postelhein. They have a presumption of being invalid. Unless you know the family and you know that you sort of have the family integrity for the past 100 years or so, whatever it is, whatever it takes to verify it. Sharotzis, other lands. Eretz Yisrael muchsik lifsel posel. In Eretz Yisrael, if you find somebody who has a presumptive status of being invalid, so then he's invalid. Muchsik kosher, he's presumed to be kosher. He has a genealogical integrity. So then kosher, he's kosher. So there's a little bit of a problem here. What difference is Eretz Yisrael from other nations? In other words, you're telling me if he's presumptively posel, then he's posel. Okay, well, that means that if he's not presumptively posel, then what? He's kosher. But then we say if he's presumptively kosher, then he's kosher. Well, what happens if somebody has neither presumption of invalidation nor presumption of validation? Hostam kosher. You're saying that if he's presumed invalid, then he's invalid, which means that without that presumption, a regular person is kosher. And then you say the opposite. If you know he's kosher, he's kosher. But if otherwise we don't know anything, then presumably he's not kosher. So Rav Huna bar Tachlifa Mishmei Rav Huna resolves this. Loy kasher, it's not difficult. Top of Ayin Aleph and Beis. Kan latzi isha, kan lahoitzi isha miyadei. When a person gets married, he should investigate. But if a person is already married and he's concerned about his wife's integrity, so then we say stay married, don't worry about it. Eretz Yisrael is also on a higher level than other nations. Okay. Now we know that Bavel is sort of the strongest genealogical integrity, and that was because Ezra sort of purified Bavel with the Asar Yochsin. Now, a few interesting stories here. Rav Yosef says, Kol b'Bavel masiin lo isha. Initially, they said anybody who spoke the Babylonian language, he had an accent a Babylonian accent. So then we presume he's from Bavel, and we treat him as sort of a higher genealogical integrity. But today, there are a lot of people that are learning that accent just so that they could appear to be from Bavel, so they can find a more eligible spouse. So Chashinan, we don't necessarily consider you a member of Bavel just because you can speak with a Babylonian accent. Okay, an interesting story here. Zeiri was from Bavel. He sort of tried to avoid Rabbi Yochanan. Why? To have Amr la Nasabarti, Rabbi Yochanan wanted him to marry his daughter. The problem is that the student, Zeiri, considered himself of a higher genealogical class than Rabbi Yechanan, who came from Eretz Yisrael. So he sort of avoided him. One day, they were traveling together. They come to this this bend, this river pathway. Yeah, basically they get to a narrow trail where they're basically forced onto the same roads, and they had to cross over this brook. So Zeiri carries Rabbi Yechanan on his shoulders. Rabbi Yechanan is his Rebbe. He's carrying this through this brook. So Rabbi Yechanan says to him, "Rising Shera, Banson like Shera is my, you're my student. Is my Torah kosher, but my daughters are not kosher. You're willing to learn from me, but you're not willing to marry my daughter. My daitech, what's your concern?" Because the Mishnah says, "Asar yochsin olami bavel kehanam leviyim Yisraelim," right? So Rabbi Yechanan offers the following suggestion about what the Mishnah means when it says that. One second. In other words, when the Mishnah says he took everybody up, you think it means that he took every invalid person. But if that's the case, then it says Kahanim Levim. Did he take all the Kahanim and all the Levim? Obviously not. He obviously left some behind, and some Yisraelim too behind. So clearly not everybody came up. So that means presumably not all the Psulim came up either. And therefore, don't be so convinced of your integrity. There are some Psulim in Bavel too. The Mishnah basically doesn't prove that you're of a higher class. Sorry. They left other people. They left some of the psulim behind too. The Gemara says he forgot. Basically, Rabbi Lazar says that the interpretation of the mission is it's true that Kahanim, Levim, and Yisraelim were left behind, but every single one of the psulim came up. So this part of this part of the story Rabbi Yechanan forgot, and therefore he thought that they were sort of equally genealogically pure, but that wasn't the case. Okay, Ula ikla Pumpadisa, Labei Rav Yehudah. Ula went to Pumpadisa, to the house of Rav Yehudah. Chazil Rav Yitzchak, brother of Yehudah, the god of Loin Asif. So the son of Rav Yehudah, Rav Yitzchak, was getting older and he wasn't getting married. Amarle, my time will come in Sivleimar. It's celebrate. Why aren't you marrying off your son? Amarle, Miyadana Mehecha Insiv. I don't know where to marry him. Amarle, Otuanan Miyadina Mehecha Kasinan. Do we know our genealogical history? Some of us don't know. In other words, like how far back do you want to go? Now remember, Ula lives at the conclusion of Bayis Sheni, right? Now we know that some pretty unpleasant stuff happened at the conclusion of Bayis Rishon. Maybe we descend from those relationships. What exactly we're referring to? Dilma, do we know where we come from? Dilma, maybe we come from Mehanaf Tachsiv, Noshim B'Tzion Inu. Women in Tzion were violated. Pesulas Bar Yehuda. Virgins in the cities of Yehuda. So in other words, maybe we're the children actually of basically non-Jews, non-Jewish fathers. Because during the battle for Zion, the non-Jews raped the woman en masse. And if you'll say, okay, well, okay, well, the child of a non-Jewish father and a Jewish mother, a child is still kosher. Okay, fine. So it's still kosher at least, even if you come from non-Jewish fathers. Hold on a second.
Could be worse.
The problem is that before the destruction of the first temple, there was a lot of adultery going on. The Dilma we come from, these at the first states, those that sit on beds of ivory, their bed sheets are filthy. This refers to men, pardon my language here, I'm just translating. Men who urinate in front of their beds, arumim naked. And Ravavu sort of cursed this type of behavior. it's basically very degrading behavior. If a person needs to go to the bathroom, they should do, obviously this is before the days of toilets, right? Everyone,
Or at least go outside.
or to a corner or something like that. If a person sort of is like that in front of his wife, it's very disrespectful and degrading. Right. And the Gemara says there are all sorts of very easy alternatives, such as using a corner. Yeah. Anyway, so the Gemara says, in other words, is the concern here just that they sort of, pass the water in front, and undress in front of their beds? Is that the concern? If that's the concern, why does the verse say, now they will go to exile in front of the they'll be first to be exiled? The Gemara says, okay, this is very degrading behavior, and it's certainly not appropriate, but it's not that crazy. Is that a reason to be put into exile first? Rabu says something else is going on here. It's something much more filthy than this sort of unbecoming behavior that's going on. What is that? These are people that party a lot. They connect their beds, and they sort of wife trade. And their beds are filthy with semen that doesn't belong to them. Okay, clearly here this is serious adultery. And Ula's saying, look, this happened 600 years ago. We have no clue where these people are. Maybe they're us. So don't be so concerned about your genealogical purity, even if you come from Bavel. Very likely all of Bavel basically descended from people that were in this group. So who knows? Okay, so Amr Lei, so he says to Ula, Hechin Evet, so what should I do? In other words, how in the world can I verify anybody? So he says, Amr Lei zil basa shtikusa. Look for silence. The people of Eretz Yisrael, when they wanted to investigate a family for genealogical purity, how would they do it? They would see which one was silent first. Presumably that one was more genealogically pure. Okay, so if I may give my own interpretation here, what Ula basically is suggesting is to switch from a verification of his history to verification of midas, of character traits. If you have good character traits, presumably you come from a good genealogical history. This is my own interpretation. I don't know if it's accurate or not. Okay. Amar Rav says, this is the method sort of verifying the genealogical integrity of those from Bavel. So Gemara says, it's not the case. Rav came by and he actually investigated somebody's genealogy. So Gemara says, my love, he asked them for their genealogical history, the record book. Gemara says, with their silence. He sort of saw which families were quiet and had good character traits, and that's how we presume that their genealogical history was acceptable. This is what he told. This is what he said to them. Beduku, go check Ishaski, Eloishaski. See if they're silent or not. Amar Yehudah, Amar Rav. Rav Yehudah says in the name of Rav, if you see two people fighting with each other, there is likely a genealogical flaw in one of them, and sort of heaven is preventing them from getting too close to each other, so that their daughters don't marry each other. Don't give their daughters to each other. Amar Vishur ben Levi. Rabbi Levi says, if you see two families that sort of have this long-standing feuds, one of those have a genealogical flaw, and they don't allow the other family to connect with them. Okay, and now we get to geography. So we'll talk about basically how do you define Bavel? And what are the areas in Bavel that were sort of, the areas known for a genealogical purity and the areas that weren't? So we begin. Amr Papa, we'll see a little bit of this and then we'll stop. Amr Papa, Mishmei Rav. Rav Papa says the name of Rav. Bavel, the land of Bavel, Bria, it's healthy. What does that mean? A healthy means they're genealogically pure. There was a town. Okay, so Bavel basically, we'll probably go through most of this tomorrow because you need a map. I highly recommend looking at the article, looking at some other map. You just had a brief look. I think there's a map in the next page, is there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is a map. So the map will be helpful more for tomorrow. Today we'll just basically, so there's two rivers. There's in Hebrew we call them there's the Pros and the Chidekel. In English, the translate Pros is the Euphrates, the Chidekel is the Tigris. And traditional Bavel, which is modern day Iraq, is sort of between those two rivers, but not the confluence. So I believe the Euphrates flows into the Tigris, or maybe the opposite. I don't remember which one it is. It's in southern Iraq. It doesn't get that far. So we sort of want to know where the borders are. One side is the Euphrates. I believe that's the western side. I believe the eastern side is the Tigris. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we sort of need to know the northern between the two borders, and then along the rivers, what are the northern and southern cities? So now along the southern border, I believe, is Mishon, town of Mishon. Mishon is Misa, death. What does that mean? That means most of the people in Mishon, virtually everybody in Mishon is Mamzerim. You don't want to marry somebody from Mishon. Modai, the city of Modai, Choyla, they're sort of sick. We'll explain this in a moment. Elam, the city of Elam, Goiseses, they're sort of on life support. Umab and Choyla Goiseses. What's the difference in somebody who's sick and somebody who's on life support? Roiv Choylam L'chayim. Most people who are sick will live. Roiv Goisam Lamisa. Most of the people on life support will die. Okay, so basically, the city of Elam, majority are kosher. The city of Modai, majority are kosher. The city of Elam, majority are not kosher. They're mamzerim. Okay. I think we'll stop here. Okay. For tomorrow, I highly recommend just taking a brief look at the map. You don't have to spend too much time on it, but that will sort of give a lot of help for bottom over here, top of page tomorrow. Okay, have a great day.